The storm that left her for dead sky above the frozen world was dark and heavy. Snow kept falling from above, thick and sharp like knives. Strong winds howled through the silent mountains, cutting through every layer of warmth and peace. Nothing moved. Even the animals had gone silent, hiding deep in caves or beneath the ice. In the middle of that storm, a small figure stumbled through the snow. Her skin was pale blue, her hair long and silver, but almost frozen solid. She was young barely, a teenager in human years. Her eyes, once full of light, were dull now. Her hands trembled as she tried to walk. Her clothes, once fine and royal, were torn and soaked. She didn't know where her people had gone. All she remembered was fire, screaming, and her mother's hand pushing her into an escape pod. Now, she was alone, and the cold was winning. She fell. The snow was deep, too deep. She didn't rise this time. Her body was weak, too weak. Her breath came slower and slower. Her vision blurred. Around her, the world faded into white dot and then dash nothing dot miles away. Eli crouched beside a small scanner inside his snow-camouflaged shelter. He was a human scout, assigned to survey abandoned sectors of the planet. Most of the time it was quiet, frozen ruins, crashed ships, empty caves. But tonight, the screen blinked. One life form faint, almost gone. He stared at the location. It was outside, far from any base. In this storm, it had to be a mistake. He hesitated, but then grabbed his coat and ran. Eli trudged through the snow, wind smashing against his goggles. The signal was getting weaker. He pushed harder. He didn't know what he was looking for, but the idea of someone dying out here alone, he couldn't ignore it. Then, something under the snow, a shimmer. He dropped to his knees, digging fast, with gloved hands. There she was, a girl, not human, blue skin, nearly frozen solid. Small body curled tight, her lips were purple, her eyes barely open. No, come on, he whispered. He picked her up gently. She was so cold, it hurt to touch her. He wrapped her in his coat, then turned back to the shelter, running as fast as he could through the snow, holding her close. Inside the shelter, Eli laid her on the heated sleeping pad. He turned the heaters on full blast. He rubbed her hands, placed warm packs on her chest and back, and spoke gently, even though he knew she couldn't understand. "You're gonna be okay. Stay with me." For hours, she didn't move. Eli stayed beside her the whole time. He watched her chest rise and fall so slow. Too slow then, just before sunrise, her eyes opened. Only slightly. She saw him, this strange creature, not like her, but his eyes were kind. She reached out slowly, shakily, and grabbed his shirt. He froze. Then, carefully, he covered her hand with his. "You're safe now," he said softly. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the feeling. Warmth, not just heat, but something deeper. For the first time since she crashed, she let out a weak breath. Not of pain, but of peace. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside, a bond had already started, quiet, fragile, and unbreakable. Warming a stranger, Suleli barely slept that night. The small alien girl lay wrapped in blankets beside the heater, her body weak, her breathing shallow but steady. He checked on her every few minutes, refilling the heat packs, adjusting her head, making sure she didn't slip into stillness. Something inside him had changed the moment she grabbed his shirt. It wasn't just instinct anymore. It was responsibility and, maybe something even deeper than that. By morning, the storm outside had quieted, but inside the shelter, tension still hung heavy. She opened her eyes again, this time wider. Eli noticed immediately. He crouched beside her, speaking in a soft voice. "Hey, can you hear me?" She blinked slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Eli poured warm water into a small metal cup and helped her drink. She swallowed slowly, shakily, her throat dry from the cold. Her eyes bright violet, now that he could see them clearly, watched his every move. He held out a hand. "Eli," he said, touching his chest. "I'm Eli." She stared. After a long pause, she reached out with trembling fingers and touched his hand. Her voice finally came out, quiet and cracked. Zura. He nodded gently. "Zura. Okay, Zura. Over." The next few hours, he helped her sit up. He fed her soft food, just broth, mostly. She couldn't eat much, but she tried. Every time she coughed or trembled, Eli's stomach twisted. She looked so fragile, like she could vanish at any second. She didn't talk much. Sometimes she whispered a word in her own language. Sometimes she looked toward the window, eyes clouded with sadness. She had lost something or someone. Eli didn't ask. Not yet. He just stayed with her. He cleaned her wounds. He helped her walk, one slow step at a time across the shelter. She followed him silently, like a shadow. When he moved, she moved. When he sat, she sat beside him, and every time he stood up to go outside or do a task, she reached for his hand, as if afraid he would disappear one afternoon. As Eli checked the perimeter of the shelter, Zura sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching a small fire crackle in the center stove. Her eyes flickered to movement outside a metallic shape. It wasn't Eli. It hovered, and it had no face. A drone. Zura's body stiffened. She recognized it, not human-made. It belonged to the ones who had attacked her ship. Her breath caught. She stood too quickly and collapsed, pain shooting through her legs. Eli heard the crash and rushed inside. "Zura," she pointed outside, eyes wide with panic. Eli turned. The drone was gone. He grabbed his scanner, but it showed nothing. Still, Zura was shaking. He pulled her close, letting her feel the warmth of his chest. She clung to him, her small frame pressed tightly to his. "You're safe," he whispered, though he wasn't sure anymore. "I promise." That night, Zura didn't sleep. She sat close to Eli, curled under his arm. Her body had stopped trembling, but her eyes stayed open, watching the shadows. She finally spoke. "They find me?" Eli turned his head. "Who?" She struggled with the words, choosing each one carefully. "Bad ones. My ship. They take my mother." She pushed me. "Say, run." Then, boom, fire, noise, gone. Eli understood enough. Pirates, maybe, or worse. The kind of raiders that hunted young aliens for black market sales or experimentation. He clenched his fists. "And then you were alone," he said. She nodded. Her voice was a whisper. "I hide. Snow cold, so cold." Eli felt something in his chest tighten. He reached out and gently took her hand again. "But you made it. You're still here." She looked up at him. "Because you." Then she leaned against him fully, her eyes finally closing. Her breath calmed. For the first time since she'd arrived, she slept without fear. Outside, far beyond the hills, something beeped softly on a distant scanner. A new signal had been detected. Her life signature. And someone else had taken her in. Whoever controlled the drone had just locked on. They were coming. But for now, in the tiny shelter warmed by a fire and a human's arms, Zura slept like a child who had finally found a home. Learning to speak without words, Shura woke up to the sound of gentle wind brushing against the shelter walls. It was different now. No longer the angry howl of a deadly storm, but the soft breath of a recovering world. The snowstorm had passed, but something darker was on the horizon. Eli was already up, moving quietly around the shelter. He prepared rations and checked the scanner logs for any new movement. Last night, a drone had been spotted, and not a human one. Alien tech. Advanced, quiet, dangerous. Whoever was looking for Zuro wasn't planning a rescue. She sat up slowly, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. Her body still ached, but her strength had returned in small steps. Every day since that frozen night, her skin had regained its glow. Her breath was stronger, her gaze clearer. But what stood out most was how closely she stayed to Eli. She still barely spoke. She didn't need to. When Eli placed food in front of her, she'd give a soft nod. When he walked toward the door, her hand would twitch, silently asking, "Are you coming back?" And when he sat beside her, she would lean into his side not with fear, but something closer to trust. Outside, the landscape was vast and white. Eli took her out carefully, making sure she stayed warm. She looked around with wide eyes. The world was quiet, untouched. She pointed at things curiously: a bird, a piece of broken satellite, the frozen tips of mountain trees. He told her the words: bird, snow, sky, cold. She repeated them slowly, voice soft, unsure but trying. Her alien accent made the words sound different, musical. Eli smiled each time. Inside the shelter, he began teaching her, using his datapad images, sounds, matching her language with his. They laughed one evening when she accidentally called his boot a cloud thing. She pointed at it and shook her head, repeating his words slowly. Boot. They were learning together. But behind the piece, something lingered. Eli had seen faint movements on the scanner, just flickers, not close, but moving, slow and steady, like hunters waiting for the right time. He didn't tell her. Not yet. She had only just begun to smile. Again. But he started preparing. He reinforced the door, packed emergency supplies, set alarms around the shelter, and every night, he checked his weapon, an old plasma rifle he hadn't touched in years. Zura watched all this quietly. She wasn't foolish. She knew what it meant. But instead of panicking, she began to help without being asked. She cleaned tools, handed him cables, learned how to open and close the power vents. She even placed her small hands over the scanner and memorized the warning lights. She wasn't just surviving now. She was learning how to defend herself. Days passed. The cold softened. Life returned slowly to the snow-covered world. Small plants broke through the frost. Birds flew overhead again. But one night, everything changed. It was just after dusk. Eli was checking the outer sensors. Zura sat near the fire, drawing strange shapes in the frost on the window. Suddenly, the scanner beeped about multiple life approaching from the east. Not human. Not registered. Armed. Eli froze. His heart dropped. They had found her. He turned to her. "Zura, we need to move." She stood immediately. No questions. No fear. Just silent understanding. He grabbed the emergency pack. Zura took only one thing: a small silver pendant from her pod. It had belonged to her mother. As they moved toward the back exit, Eli handed her a small heat gun. "Only if you need to," he said. She took it. Her fingers shook, but she nodded. They ran through the snow, their feet quiet but quick. The sky above turned dark blue. Shadows moved behind them, silent, ghost-like. The enemy was not shouting, not chasing, just following, slowly, as if they already knew where the pair would go. Eli and Zura reached a hidden cave he had scouted weeks ago. It was small, tight, but warm inside with geothermal vents. He lit a soft glow lamp and checked the scanner. The red dots were closer. Now Zura looked at him. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. He was surprised to hear her voice so clear. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know they don't get to take you. Not while I'm here." She nodded, slowly understanding, not just the words, the feeling behind them, for the first time. She reached for his hand, not out of fear, but strength, and for the first time, Eli felt it too. They weren't just a lost alien girl and a human scout anymore. They were becoming something else, a team, a bond, a story the galaxy would never forget. But first, they had to survive the night. The ones who left her behind the cave was still and silent. except for the sound of their breath. Zura leaned against the wall, her eyes closed, holding her mother's silver pendant tightly in her hand. Eli sat beside her, watching the scanner screen light up again, and again 3 red dots now. Close, moving slow, he had sealed the cave entrance with snow and placed a sensor trap a few meters outside. They would know if anything approached. But still, Eli didn't relax. The enemies weren't rushing in. They were waiting, as if testing how long the prey could hide. It wasn't just about finding Zura anymore. It was about breaking her down. By the next morning, the signals had vanished. Either the hunters had pulled back, or they were circling. The scanner couldn't tell. Eli looked at Zura. She hadn't spoken all night. Her eyes were open, but far away, trapped in some memory she hadn't yet shared. He offered her some food. She barely touched it. "Zura," he said quietly, "I know you don't want to go back there, but I need to know what really happened. Your ship, your people, your past." She didn't look at him. Instead, she raised her pendant and whispered, "Mother said run." "I did." "Why were they chasing you?" She looked at him now, not scared, angry. "They want what I carry." Eli frowned. "What is it?" She opened the pendant. Inside was a thin, glowing crystal, small, blue, and humming with life. "This?" Eli asked. Zura nodded. "It holds a seed of my people's memory. Our code, our world. We are fading." Eli felt his throat tighten. "And they want to erase you completely." "Yes, they don't want a survivor. They want silence." Eli checked the map. "I think we need to find that wreck. The ship you crashed in. If anything's left, records, data, black box it, might help us understand why they're hunting you so hard." Zura hesitated, but then nodded. Her eyes were firm now. She was done running without knowing why. They left the cave before noon. The weather was soft, the sky gray. Snow still covered everything, but the winds had calmed. As they crossed a frozen ridge, Zura pointed. There a blackened structure, half sunken into ice. The wreck. The ship was barely a shell. Its outer hull was torn open, exposing shattered corridors. Burnt metal, ash, bodies long gone. Zura stepped inside like a ghost, walking through a forgotten memory. Her feet moved slowly, her hands touching walls she once knew. She paused in front of a broken door. "This was our room," she whispered. Eli said nothing. He followed quietly. She walked further, deeper, until she reached the command deck. A large console still blinked with power, faint, but alive. She dropped to her knees and began pressing buttons quickly. Her fingers moved fast, like someone who hadn't forgotten anything. Eli was shocked. "You remember all this?" She nodded. "I helped my mother. She was the ship's heart." The screen lit up. Zura accessed encrypted logs, messages, voice recordings. Finally, one file opened. A holographic message appeared. A woman with glowing silver eyes, regal in posture, appeared. She looked like Zoroder, wiser, stronger. "To any who find this," she said, "if Zuro lives, protect her. She carries the soul code, the last breath of our world. She is our future." Zura's hands shook. "They came for us." The message continued. "We did not resist. We knew our time was ending, but we sent one spark into the snow. Please, protect the spark." The hologram faded. Zura closed her eyes. "They knew we would not survive. My people chose memory over war." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. "They didn't abandon you. They chose you." She opened her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. "But they also left me alone." "You're not alone anymore," Eli said quietly. And for the first time, Zura believed it. Outside the ship, a silent drone hovered in the shadows of the trees. It had recorded everything. The message, the seed, her location. And it transmitted it silently across space. Hours later, far above the planet's surface, a ship awoke, black, sleek, full of weapons. The signal had been received. The spark was alive now. It would be extinguished, but the human and the girl would not go down easy. They were ready. They want her back, dead, or Elavath message had been sent. Far above the quiet snow-covered planet, a silent predator drifted into orbit. Black as void, its engines barely made a sound. No lights, no insignia. Only one directive pulsed in its core system. Terminate the carrier. Recover the code. Erase. The trail. Inside the ship, a strike team prepared. Not soldiers, not rescuers. These were extermination agents. No faces, no names, only precision. They moved in unison, loading silent weapons, neural dampeners, and cryo cuffs. Below, in the ice valley, Zura and Eli stood alone. They didn't know what was coming, but they could feel it in the air. Back at the wreckage, Zura finished copying the remaining data onto Eli's pad. Fragments of her people's memories, culture, songs, blueprints, everything the crystal inside her pendant hadn't held. The legacy of an entire species now lived in a fragile file, carried by a human with nothing to gain, except her trust. Eli looked out across the snowfields. His hand tightened on his plasma rifle. We shouldn't stay here any longer, Zura agreed. We need high ground. We'll see them coming. They left the ship behind and began climbing toward an old comms tower embedded into a cliff. The tower had been abandoned for years, but the base below still had power. If they could activate its distress beacon, maybe, just maybe, someone out there would listen. But time was against them. 2 hours later, the sky cracked. Not thunder, not a storm. A dropship. Sleek, fast, no windows. It sliced through the clouds like a silent knife and landed several kilometers west of their position. The snow around it melted instantly. From its hatch, 6 beings stepped out, tall, armored, unreadable. Their suits had no markings. Their weapons were shaped like silence itself, tools, built not for war, but for clean erasure. They moved fast. They knew exactly where she was, in the command bunker beneath the tower. Zura worked quickly, fingers dancing over old human tech. The terminal sparked, fought her, and then came alive. Screens blinked. Signal lines connected. Can you send out a distress call? Eli asked. Trying. Need time. He nodded, checking the motion scanner. His fingers hovered over the trigger. The dots were moving. We don't have much of that, he muttered. Outside, the wind picked up again, not natural, but driven by the heat of approaching engines. Eli stepped to the outer ridge, his rifle aimed. He saw them, dark shapes moving through the snow without a sound. Not even footprints were left behind. He pulled back. Zura, they're here. Her voice stayed calm. Keep them away. I'm almost done. How long? 10 minutes. You'll get 5. The first agent reached the base entrance. He lifted his hand, fired a small pulse, and melted the steel lock like wax. The door opened. No sound. No warning. Eli waited behind the wall. As the agent stepped inside, he fired one clean shot. Direct hit, head and chest. The figure dropped. Sparks flew. Not blood machine parts. They're not just aliens, Eli said under his breath. They're programmed killers. Zura didn't look back. More are coming. Eli grabbed a second charge pack, clipped it to his belt, and ran to the side corridor. He planted 2 explosives on the walls and waited. Another entered. Then another. He hit the detonator. Boom. The tunnel shook. Zura kept typing. The beacon screen glowed. Uplink established. Signal transmitting. But it wasn't over yet. Behind her, a figure emerged from the shadows. It had dodged the outer fight. It raised its weapon. But before it could, Fiasura turned, and her eyes lit up bright blue. Glowing from within, a wave of energy burst from her chest, like a pulse of memory. The figure froze. Its weapon fell. Eli ran in. What the hell was that? Zura clutched her pendant. It remembered me. I used its language. You controlled it. No, I woke it up. The unit collapsed, smoke rising from its chest. Behind it, the rest began pulling back, but it was too late. A signal had been sent across the stars. Not just a distress call, but the voice of a forgotten race, crying out from the snow. We are not gone. Eli looked at Zura. Her face was calm now, but her hands were shaking. You all right? He asked. She nodded, then whispered, They won't stop? No, Eli agreed. But neither will we. Outside, snow began to fall against off, silent. But the girl who once froze in silence now stood tall, beside the human who wouldn't let go, and together, they were ready. The chase across frozen nights, signal echoed across space. Somewhere, in the old data cores of forgotten satellites, a name burned bright, Zura, last daughter of a vanished world. And now, she was no longer hidden. On the frozen planet's surface, night fell heavy again, darker than before. The snow gleamed under the cold light of twin moons, but peace was gone. The air felt hunted. Every shadow moved with intent. Eli packed quickly. The base beneath the Cum's tower wouldn't last long. The blast from his charges had bought them time, but not safety. The agents would return, smarter, faster, and they would not make the mistake of underestimating a wounded girl and alone. Human again. We need to disappear, Eli said, loading the last of the rations into his SATCHEL.ZURA, stood by the door, her pendant glowing faintly beneath her coat. Her expression had changed. No longer just afraid. Now focused. I know. Where to go, she said. Eli raised an eyebrow. You remember something? She nodded slowly. Beneath the valley, there's a gate. Not just stone, our kind made it. Old. Hidden. My mother showed me once, before the war. It can lead us away, but only if it still breathes. A gate, like a portal. Yes, built by ancestors. It sleeps, but it listens to us. Eli looked down at her, seeing not just a girl, but a key to something far larger. A world trying to wake. They moved through the icy wilderness under the cover of night. Snow crunched softly beneath their boots. They didn't speak much. Every breath was saved for survival. Eli led them through narrow cliff paths and hidden slopes. Zura followed closely, always keeping one hand near the crystal hanging from her neck. It pulsed, as if it felt the pull of something ancient, deep beneath the ice. But they weren't alone. Somewhere behind them, the hunters had returned. Silent airborne units now moved through the treetops, flying in perfect formation. Heat signatures, motion tracking, heart rate mapping. They were reading the environment like a story, and it was leading them straight to her. Hours later, Zura pointed toward a sharp drop in the valley. There, she said, underneath. Eli helped her down a frozen ledge. The cave entrance was hidden beneath jagged stone, nearly invisible from above. They slipped inside, into a tunnel that shimmered with frost and ancient carvings. Symbols lit up faintly as Zura passed her fingers across the walls. This was no ordinary cave. This was alien architecture alive and waiting. The tunnel led to a massive chamber. Towering crystal structures grew from the floor, glowing blue and white. In the center sat a circular platform half buried in ice. This is it, Zura said softly. The gate. Eli stared in awe. Can it still work? Zura stepped forward and knelt beside the center. She pressed her pendant into a small slot. The room shook, ice cracked, crystals flared to life. The circular platform began to spin slowly, lifting pieces of itself from the ground floating in midair. Then a voice, not in words, not in language, but in memory. Zura. Single quotes. Eyes went wide. Images filled her mind. Her mother standing here, showing her how the gate worked. The ancestors calling it the breath between stars. A way home, not just across space, but through the memory of her people. But it wasn't finished. The gate needed time to fully power. How long? Eli asked. Zura's voice was distant, like she was listening to a faraway song. 10 minutes. Eli turned, his rifle already raised. Then we hold the line. They came fast. The first drone slipped through the tunnel eye, shot it down before it could speak. Sparks flew. More followed. Zura stood beside the gate, arms outstretched, her pendant blazing. Lines of energy flowed from her hands into the platform. Her body shook, but she held firm. More agents stormed in. Eli fought like a machine. Shot counted, every step calculated. He used the crystals for cover, lured the machines into choke points. Still, they kept coming. A pulse hit his side. He fell. Zura screamed. Her power flared. A blast of energy tore across the chamber, slamming into the nearest agent and shattering its body like glass. She ran to Eli. He was hurt, blood on his side, breathing heavy. "You have to go," he said. "Finish it. Not without you." "Zura, no." She grabbed him. "You saved me. Now I save you." She pulled him onto the platform. The gate flickered, then locked in. The floating pieces spun faster, brighter. The room cracked with heat and light. Behind them, the last wave of agents ran in, weapons raised, but the gate flared in. They vanished. Cold wind rushed against their faces. They reappeared, on a mountaintop under a violet sky. Twin suns shone above. Strange birds flew overhead. They had crossed space. To a forgotten sanctuary of her people. Eli collapsed, coughing. Zura knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered, "because I wouldn't let go." And, far above, for the first time in generations, the stars heard her people's voice again. She refuses to let go. Air was thinner here, high above the world, on a mountaintop that had not been touched by war or time. Strange violet skies stretched forever, with twin suns rising slowly from the horizon. Crystal trees grew from the rock like ancient towers, humming softly with energy. The winds carried the echoes of a people long gone, but not forgotten. Eli opened his eyes slowly, blinking at the sky. He was lying on soft moss that shimmered under the light. Pain throbbed in his side, but he was alive. Barely a soft hand touched his forehead. Zura sat beside him, her violet eyes full of worry. "You stayed," he whispered. She nodded. "Where are we?" Zura looked around. "This place, it's called In my mother's stories, it was the last refuge of our kind. Only the soul carriers could open the gate to reach it. Now, it's just us." Eli tried to sit up, but winced. "How bad is it?" The shot burned deep, but the crystal moss here is healing you. Slowly, you just need time. Eli exhaled, then gave a half smile. "Guess we've both been surviving on borrowed time." Days passed. Zura cared for him with quiet determination. She brought him food, fruits that glowed faintly, water from shimmering pools, pieces of fabric from the ruins to wrap his wound. She explored the sanctuary carefully, studying every crystal formation, every ruined pillar, every glowing panel that still whispered ancient knowledge. This place wasn't just a refuge. It was a library, a temple, a seed of a world waiting to be remembered. And in the silence of this sacred place, something inside her changed. The fear in her steps faded. Her voice grew stronger, her hands steadier. She had been the last of a dying people, but now she was becoming their future. On the 6th day, Eli could walk again. He followed Zura to the heart of the sanctuarian, open platform, high above the trees, surrounded by ancient monoliths. There, embedded in the center, stood a pillar with markings that pulsed slowly as she approached. Zura turned to him. "It wants to speak. You can understand it now?" Eli asked. "Not just understand. I feel it. This place remembers. It knows the pain of silence. It waited for someone to come back. And now it wants to wake up." She placed her hands on the pillar. The crystal lit up, and a soft voice filled the air, not in words, but pure emotion. Welcome, child of the song. You carry the echo. We remember. Images filled the sky, holographic projections of her people. Cities in the sky, great halls of learning, children dancing in violet fields. Then, war, explosions, silence, and one small ped escaping into the snow. Eli watched in awe. Zura watched in pain and pride. They're gone, she whispered, but their memory lives in me. She looked at Eli. And you kept it alive. But peace never lasts. On the seventh day, a sound echoed across the valley, a sharp, mechanical howl. Eli turned toward the noise, lifting his weapon. Zura narrowed her eyes. They followed. Above the mountains, a black shadow descended. A single dropship, different from the others, heavier, armed with tech neither human nor alien. It landed just outside the sanctuary. Eli raised his weapon. I can hold them off. Buy you time. Zura didn't move. No, Zura, this is my world, my people, my memory. They're not taking it again. She walked forward, past the monoliths, her pendant glowing bright as a star. From the ship, a lone figure stepped out, tall, armored, cloaked in shadows. You are the last, it said in a static voice. Surrender the code, the crystal, or be erased. Zura stared at him. I am not alone. She raised her hand. Energy surged from her chest, through the pendant, into the ground. The sanctuary responded. Crystals rose from the earth. Vines of light wrapped around the invader. He raised his weapon, but the sanctuary fought back. It didn't just protect her. It obeyed her. The figure fired, but the beam bent away. The light around Zura shimmered like armor. She stepped forward. You destroyed my people, my mother, my home, but not this. She touched the enemy's chest. Energy pulsed through her hand. Memory, history, truth. The invader screamed, stumbled back, his mask cracked beneath it. Not a monster, not a machine, but a stolen soul. Another orphan of war. Another broken child, turned into a weapon. Zura stepped back. You are not my enemy. The figure dropped his weapon and collapsed. Eli stood beside her now, stunned. What did you do? I showed him what they tried to erase. The dropship rose into the air and flew away, silent and defeated. For the first time Zura stood, tall, no longer hunted, no longer alone. She turned to Eli. I have to stay, she said. This place needs a voice again. It needs someone who remembers. Eli nodded slowly. Then I'll send a message to Earth. Tell them you're safe. Tell them who you are. Zura took his hand. Or stay. Eli looked into her eyes. For a moment, he thought of everything back home. Then he thought of the girl in the snow, who had grabbed his shirt and refused to let go. He smiled. You're not getting rid of me that easy. And so, high above a world that once knew only silence and cold, a human and an alien girl stood beneath two suns. A story of memory, of loss, and of warmth that refused to die. She had been frozen and alone, but she awoke in a human's arms, and she never let go.